Hi guys and welcome back. Following on from last week's video, today we are back and checking out on the most expensive, top-of-the-line single GPU cards. Legacy GPU Battles made it into its 10th episode. Yep, and I can't think of a better way to celebrate than to finally look at the Radeon HD 7970 versus the GTX 680. We start with the HD 7970, released in December 2011, and for staggering $549 USD, it was the fastest single-core GPU on offer from AMD. Card came with 3GB of memory, clocked at 1375 MHz and a core clock speed of 925 MHz. Aimed at enthusiasts, this card offered excellent overclocking potential, and thanks to a wider 384-bit memory bus, gaming at high resolutions was not a problem. How is it going to stack against Team Green? Are they matched closely following the last week's results? We will find out soon, but for now, let's see the Nvidia offering. The GTX 680 launched a few months later in March 2012 and for just under 500 USD. It's essentially the full-fat version of the cut-down GK104 core that we saw last week inside the GTX 670. It came with 2GB of memory clocked at 1500 MHz and a core clock speed of 1006 MHz. This generation of cards featured boost to core clock speed that would adjust the voltage every 100 milliseconds to make sure you are getting the most performance available, provided there is a thermal headroom. It's newer and 10% cheaper. Let's ask the obvious. Did Nvidia strike victory with the 680? Well, let's not delay and look at the both cards in more detail and take them apart. And if you're new around here, please consider hitting the subscribe button and like the video if you do enjoy what you see. And just like last week, both cards are from board partners. My favorite DCU2 from Asus on the 7970 and MSI's Twin Frozer 3 on the 680. Which looks better? Cast your votes down below. Size does matter, especially when we talk heatsinks. There is no running away from this. The 3-slot wide 7970 literally dwarfs the 680. Bigger and perhaps more hungry, you will need two 8-pins to power this beast on. GTX 680 happy with just two 6-pins. Also, check out the interesting power connector. The I/O for display output seems more versatile with the 680, allowing for either HDMI, DisplayPort or DVI. AMD card focused hard on those display ports, I mean there's 4 of them, but that shouldn't really be a reason to complain. Let's take the beastly 7970 apart first. It's a chonker, but I don't mind. Good to see there is a nice backplate with some writing on. Asus made sure this card looks good in your case. Very simple and held in place by 7 screws, plus the 4 spring-loaded screws around the core. The backplate will help with overall strength, but not with any thermals. Almost forgot, there are 4 additional screws at the I/O plate. Now then, a little wiggle and a small help from a flathead screwdriver and the cooler comes off. And what a cooler! I need to start weighting those coolers. 6 heat pipes and loads of thermal pads, it feels substantial. The PCB has lots of solid caps and what looks like a super beefy power delivery. Let's get it cleaned. Interesting that there is no writing on this die. Let's now apply fresh MX4 and put the card back together. No backplate on the 680 and just 4 spring-loaded screws. This is as simple as it really gets. It was apart literally as I lifted it, that's always a good sign. This Twin Frozer 3 cooler has 5 nickel-plated heat pipes and feels very lightweight. Well, after what I saw a moment ago, everything does. MSI does include GPU midplate to cool the memory modules off, and I suspect it shares some heating capacity, which is really good. The PCB, although covered, looks more simple, but for this interesting looking power connector, which must be specifically used for this model of 680 to avoid clearance issues. Let's not delay and clean off the all thermal paste. Thermals and acoustics are up next. The HD 7970 under a typical load stays at around 57.5 dB with peak temperatures of just 60 C. Total power consumption at the wall was 241 watts. The GTX 680 is nearly silent at around 55.5 dB and with a peak temperatures of just 63 C. Total power consumption was 214 watts. Now then, let's get into actual testing, starting with Heaven benchmark. It's quite simple. Here, the 7970 rules. With overclocked score of 1465, it crashed the 680 by 13%. There was more overclocking headroom with the 7970 simply because of the 680's boost clock, which pushed it nicely by itself. The higher power consumption on the 7970 actually closely matches the performance gains over the 680. Quickly looking at the last week's results, the 7970 being nearly 60% more expensive over the 7870, whilst delivering just over 50% more performance. Do you think that's a fair deal? A slightly different story with the 680, which was 25% more expensive over the 670, but only delivered under 10% more performance. Does not seem like a good deal to me. What do you guys think? Moving on to 3D Mark Firestrike, where the HD 7970 continues to dominate. Here, it was about 20% faster over the GTX 680. So far, it looks like AMD has what it takes to grab this one, but how about games? We start off with 2019's Apex Legends. Side note, I'm really bad at this game. I don't think I've ever killed an opponent, ever. With high settings, HD 7970 leads significantly and achieved 63 FPS on average. The GTX 680 behind by almost 30%, which means first point over to AMD. I used few new games in this video, one of which was 2015's Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Game was perfectly playable using high settings. 7970 leads by 27% with average of 62 FPS. I've encountered few graphical glitches with this title when using the AMD card. For a split second afraid it was going to slowly die on me, but a quick Google search revealed I had nothing to worry about. Free-to-play Crossout offers hours of fun. I'd like to find more time to build some cool vehicles. With high settings, game run with nearly 100 FPS on average on the 7970, beating the 680 by about 27%. I'm afraid that's 3-0 to AMD. Here we go, another new title, and this time it's Beware, the driving horror game. Never heard about it? Well then, why not trying it? The early versions are free to download on ModDB. I can't get enough of this game, kudos to its creator Andre. Since this is a demo, there are no settings other than shadow distance to adjust, so technically I'm maxing it out. This game is not easy to run and the results were very close between the 7970 and 680, it's only fair I called it draw. Witcher 3 with high settings comes up next. Both cards offered smooth gameplay and I saw very similar results again, within the margin of error. This means no points and another draw. 2019's remake of Resident Evil 2 is a one good looking game, especially when maxed out, which is literally the opposite of performance priority settings I used for today's testing. I allowed just 2 GB of VRAM to be utilized, not to put the GTX 680 at huge disadvantage here. Well, maybe I also felt bad for it losing so badly so far. Anyways, the 7970 steamrolls over the 680 again, and with nearly 64 FPS on average, that's 36% lead. I'm afraid that's 4-0 to AMD. Remnant from the Ashes is next, but I really should rename this segment into Nvidia from the Ashes, as we finally have a point for the 680. Using the high settings, I saw 55.5 FPS average. The 7970 was behind by a very small margin. Did you manage to grab this game off Epic Store back in the day when it was free? I'm glad I did, it's an awesome game. And we are closing the game testing with a good racing game I would love to play more of. 2019's Need for Speed Heat with medium settings runs smoothly on both cards, but the 7970 takes it with 51.5 FPS on average. The 680 is slower by about 20%, but ask any gamer, it doesn't matter if you win by a frame or 10, winning's winning. And that's it for the game testing. Let's recap what we saw. Being at the bleeding edge is not always ideal, and what we saw with the 680 today was just that. When compared to a GTX 670, it really made no sense to spend $100 extra for mere 10% performance uplift. The 7970 on the other hand, really was significantly faster than its smaller brother, the 7870. Especially if gaming at higher than Full HD resolutions, the extra 1GB of VRAM was sure nice to have. Looking at release date reviews, this pair was matched really closely, often with the 680 being faster of the two, but as the time went on, I think we all agree the AMD aged better. What an interesting battle. Did you expect this outcome? Looking at the second-hand market, the more available and affordable GTX 680 can be had for about £55 or $64, whilst the 7970 is harder to find at nearly twice the price. Hardly a card to recommend. If you happen to own any of the two, I'm pretty sure, even after 10 years from release, those are still somewhat capable GPUs, if you are to be sensible with the graphical settings. There is only one legacy GPU battle left ahead of us, and up next, it will be the turn of the dual GPU monsters. Thank you very much for watching, let me know if you enjoy the series, and I hope to see you all in the next one.